take this as seriously as civil engineers take their blueprints and electrical engineers take their circuit diagrams. This is not a simple theoretical sketch, but should be done with all seriousness, giving due importance to the technical aspects of design. When I say that there is a connection between the external players and the internal player using a dark black line, I have to be very specific on what is that connection, what is the network architecture behind it. Wired, wireless, what's the protocol? All the ideas have to be elaborated. So we started with the skeleton structure. We added the information system component, user policies and user requirements, step 1. And in step 2 now, we have added the external component and the customer component. Now we are here. From now onwards, I want you to be more detailed. I want you to take each component of the information system and elaborate on it. The first component I will be taking up is a people procedure, because I think that is most critical. The moment you identify these components and design them properly, you have won half the battle. Because ultimately, it is the humans who are using the system. They don't like the system, they will not use it, and the system will be a failure regardless of what good technicalities it has. So please understand that we have identified two different classes of users. One set of users on your right are those who use the system, and on your left are the user policies which mimics the user. I wanted to emphasize on the fact that the lowest level of pyramid has more users, and their numbers dwindle as they come up. So the user policy has to be designed 1. Second, the users don't exist in isolation. That is why they are connected, if you observe. There is a need to connect users to one another. And most importantly, there is a need for you to understand how they communicate. In a typical modern organization, whatever people may claim about flat structures, the communication between the employees in an organization always happens in a hierarchical manner. Meaning, if, for example, consider education institution like ours, if I have to communicate with principal, there is a channel which I have to choose. I can't communicate formally with principal bypassing the intermediaries. If you are able to identify the communication channels within an organization, it will be of great help. Because the software should always mimic the user behaviors. In an organization, when you are replacing a manual system with a computer-based system, there cannot be a change in the way the organization works, though we expect that to be. Are you able to identify that? Is a question. So whenever we speak about people, it is not simply saying this is the administrator, this is the user, this is the supervisor. No. It is identifying, one, the role responsibility, second, identifying the communication channel. Next. Yeah. So this I have elaborated more on. What do I mean by user communication channel? Is there a facility in the organization for communication between the buddies at the same level or no? Here it's no. They can't communicate. You have to identify them. You have to codify them in some way. And you have to, in your future design, you have to incorporate these ideas. Your user policies should mimic the actual condition. Procedures are nothing but how people interact with each other, that's all. That's why I have not elaborated on. Procedure is how a particular task is handled from person 1 to person n, from start to end. How does the handover happen? See, for example, let me consider a very simple aspect of a student registration, as most of you have chosen student information system. Information system. Let's talk about student registration as a process. How should the process work? One, somebody should allow the registration to happen within a particular period. Somebody should be responsible for that, for opening up of registration. Next, the student should be able to securely log in, see whatever subjects he is eligible for registration, select the subject. Student's role is over. What next? What next? This data should be updated approved by at least two sets of people. One, the proctor, who is responsible for the student to verify whether the timetable clash is there or not, and two, by the subject teacher, saying that this guy is eligible for my subject, using whatever criteria you want. So there is two sets of approvals which are required. How will you incorporate them? And how does the handover happen? Handover in the sense, student enters his data, that will be the database, in some table. Who should see this first, proctor or the teacher? Will proctor approve it first and then the subject teacher sees it? Or whether the teacher will first approve it and then the proctor will see it? Which way? And if one fails, how will the rollback happen? All this have to be defined. So, users and procedures are not simply listing things, but elaborating on every other related aspects regarding. And finally, when everything happens, this should go to the account section to see whether the fees has been paid. When that okay is, then finally we say that the student is registered for subject, the student should be notified. So there is an elaborate procedure which is hidden. Can you unearth the hidden relations among people to make a procedure successful? In database language we call it transaction. I call it procedure, that's all. The nomenclature is different, the idea is same. There is technical aspect to it, there is human aspect. Right? So you have to elaborate. Every aspect in detail has to be elaborated. Again, start with people, then go to next. That's my idea. Next, you have to focus on data. One more very critical component in the information system is data. The idea is very simple. You have to take raw data, do some magic, and get information. Information systems are supposed to do that. Take data, give information. Again, while you are designing the data component of information system, think that data component itself is an independent system. Meaning it should have its own input, its own processing model, it should give its output, should be controlled, there should be a proper system defined for data processing. It is not simply saying that I am using MySQL. It is defining a whole system for data handling. The choice of a software component called as database is very minimal and incidental to the discussion. Aren't there other ways to store data? Can't data be stored in files? Why should always database be the de facto way of storing information? All these questions have to be answered. Judicious analysis has to be done and the decision has to be taken. So my suggestion is there in the next slide. My suggestion is this. Don't isolate data. After you have identified the people and the procedure components, identify the data requirements of every user and see how can it be stored and processed. One. Second, once the data is stored in one place, the obvious questions to be asked is what about the security of the data, what about backup? How are you taking the challenge of providing 24/7 data access? So you have to take care about the backup, restoration, things like that. What I am focusing here is that you should not think of data as an independent component. The requirements of data should emerge from people component which I have identified earlier. Data is collected because someone needs them. Data is processed in that way because somebody wants it in that way. So the focus is human component, not technical. After you have identified independent data chunks, the challenge is how to keep them together and create a unified view. Again, there are technical angle to it. Distributed database, centralized database. Distributed database means what about all the issues involved there? So, start with people, elaborate on data, give a human treatment to it and a technical treatment together. Don't isolate. You have to spend more time on this also. Next. Next is the hardware and network taken together. Again, hardware does not mean configured P4 system or the latest desktop, just listing out the machines. No. You have identified the data. To handle the data, what kind of systems are required? And it's an iterative process. You have identified people need data, therefore data. Data has to be manipulated through computers, so what kind of systems? Why only computers? Why not handheld devices? Why always wired LAN? What about other networks? And here the networking idea is quite complex because we have already said that we have to network between the customers, external players and the organization that we are trying to design. What about compatibility? What about future updates? Who will take care about that? What about server part? Where will the server be located? How will it distribute the load given to it? How are you creating that seamless integration between different systems existing within an organization? You can probe this to the deepest possible level. I want you to ask as many questions as possible and stop at the time when you can no more find answers. Once you say that I don't know the answer for this question, go back to your textbooks on networking, find out an answer, try to apply it. WiMAX, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, what are they for? They have to apply it here somewhere. It's not because the technology exists that you apply, but there is a need that you have to apply. So the need-based application of networking component becomes very, very critical here. And it should be driven to satisfy the ultimate requirements of our information system. Maybe, for example, certain salespersons going onto the field to sell the product may have a handheld device connected to the main server using a Wi-Fi network. Elaborate. Though the information of the company is available to the customers using HTTP protocol, once the e-commerce component comes in, the transaction comes in, the payment comes in, you should go for HTTPS. So there are various ideas to be explored here. I am giving you just a snapshot. Don't think that since the figure looks very, very simple, treatment is simple. Next. Finally, when everything is over, I want you to focus on software. Because as I say, software is incidental. Don't start with software and try to support everything through software. No. Try to design everything and finally try to build a software depending on your other requirements. Because you need a networking environment, you may start working in Java. Because the user interface has to be very good, because you have done a user analysis and found out their competence in using the system, you may want a usable system, therefore you may go for web-based. So the choices for software design should come from all of the requirements. What you guys are doing is you are taking the reverse way. You are starting with software and then trying to justify it. No. Software should be designed in response to the business needs. Technology should follow business, not business following technology. So your choice of Linux, GNU Linux, Apache server, PHP, whatever you are saying in software component is not right. Is there a requirement for them and therefore you are going to it is a critical question. Should it be web-based standalone, client server-based, thin client, fat client? All these questions need to be answered. Finally, you are deciding on your software component and then go on designing the software component, which I understand all of you are very capable of. Next. So, this is what you have to get after round 3. In an elaborated, we started with the basic skeleton. We have improved upon component after component, component after component. Somewhere in the journey you should have such a diagram. Not using this clip art drawings, but filling it with actual details of how your system should be. A workable system should have these many issues. These are the components which you should tackle in some form or other. If you can answer each of the question posed in this diagram, that means you have reached around 20% of your work. I hope the idea is clear on what is the process model to be used in designing an information. Before I have nothing else, I guess. I have nothing else. I want to make one thing very, very clear, that I have not deviated much from whatever has been discussed in the class for the sake of uniformity. Though in most of the practical scenarios, one size fits all does not apply. I know that very well. But still, I feel I have given a very, very basic and probably the most simple way to start your work. The actual implementation of any information systems will not be as simple as we have discussed. It's not a copybook case like this. It's not straightforward. You have to know how to respond to the challenges. But as pre-final year students, if you are able to answer the questions which we have taken up in the class and give a satisfactory answer to it, I hope the subject and the efforts that we put in to deliver this course will be justified. I wish you good luck. Hope not to see any diagrams in future. Thank you.